Hey friends, Annie F. Downs here. I'm so happy to be with you today, talking in this breakout about discipleship and what it looks like in our everyday lives. Now, I want to tell you a couple things up front. For starters, it's a breakout. It's like a workshop. So I'm going to draw some things for you, and I've got some graphs and some things that I want to say to you about discipleship, because have we been friends long enough, you know that I'm just the one who's going to tell you like the nuts and bolts of things. Like I'm not here to say big, fluffy, beautiful things, though those are very important. That's just not my lane, especially about discipleship. I'm very feet on the ground. And if you heard me talk a couple of years ago at IF, I got to talk about discipleship and what it looked like in my life personally when I was a child with my grandmother, and what it meant that she was kind of in my life as a mentoring discipleship voice. For starters, let's just take a second and talk about the difference between mentoring and discipleship. I didn't even look up the definitions. I'm just kind of telling you where we want to go today, because I want to lean toward the discipleship conversation over a mentoring conversation. Because really, you can be mentored in a lot of different areas of your life. I have a work mentor. You could have a physical health mentor. My counselor, a lot of times I would consider her like a mentor in my emotional health. There's a lot of different areas of your life where you can get mentorship. But particularly when it comes to discipleship, the idea of discipleship is walking life with someone else with a particularly spiritual emphasis on what you are doing. And so that is the way we want to talk today, is more about discipleship. And sometimes that word can be super intimidating, because you're like, can I even? Or how do I even? That's what we're going to talk about today. So I wanted to introduce you to two people today. I've got a whole box of Sharpies to pick from, because that's just, as Tabitha Brown says, that's my business. First, I want you to meet Becca. This is Becca. And this is Nancy. Should I have used different colors? Maybe. I don't know. Let's just go with it. For starters, let me tell you, and also, I don't want you to worry. I know these walls are beautifully white. We have two big old sticky notes here. So I'm not writing onto the wall, just before you panic. And I'm sure some of you who are more thoughtful than me already walked through, like, why is Annie drawing on a white wall with Sharpie? I got you. So let me tell you a little bit about Becca. Becca is in her mid-20s. She lives here in Nashville. She has on a skirt and shoes. I'm not an illustrator, but this is Becca. She has hands. She has a face. She smiles. Let me give her cute, she kind of does have let's give her a cute ponytail. This is going terribly. There's her, let's give her some bangs there. That's a little bit better. This is Becca. She lives here in Nashville. She's only actually lived here for a couple of years. We had some mutual friends in the town where she moved from. She's married. They just got married right before they moved to Nashville. And we go to the same church. And our mutual friends in the city we used to live in connected us and said, we would love for y'all to get to know each other. So this is Becca. Again, mid-20s. Let me add that. This is going to be very fun. Mid-20s, married, just moved to Nash. I live in Nashville, if that's helpful. We live in the same city, Becca and I. Now, let me tell you about Nancy. Nancy also just moved to Nashville not that long ago. Nancy and I talk a lot while we go on walks together, so I'm going to put her in like a workout outfit. This isn't going very well. Here's her head. Here's her arms. Okay, that's fine. These are yoga pants. This is a tank top, right? It's fine. There she, you know what? I'm surprisingly proud of that. I need you to actually know I'm actually very proud, because I'm a terrible illustrator. Nancy has brown hair. It's about this long. Sure, that's fine. Nancy also has eyes. Does Becca have eyes? Yes. Nancy also has eyes. Okay, Nancy is older than me. I'm 40. Nancy's older than I am. She's also married, and she has kids. And she just moved to Nashville too a couple of years ago. And Nancy has adult kids who lived in Nashville. And so she left the city where she lived and she moved here. And I knew her through work when she was in her other city. But then when she moved here, we connected again. And what you've probably guessed by now is Nancy now disciples me and I disciple Becca. Nancy is an active part of my life, and I am now an active part of Becca's life. And so I just kind of want to tell you about the two of them and tell you about our relationships as a way of telling you what discipleship can look like. Discipleship looks a lot of different ways, but this is what it looks like in my life and has always looked like in my life as a believer. And then we have since it's a breakout session, we have some questions for a Q&A, right? Cute, right? We have some questions for a Q&A at the end. I first want to tell you a little bit about Nancy. For both of these, I want us to go over a couple of really important things. So, what does Nancy know that I need? And what does Nancy not know? I think those are both really important for us to talk about when you're talking about the person you're inviting into your life to be kind of a discipling voice and a discipling presence in your life. Because there's a reason both of these women were right for me. Let me tell you why Nancy was right for me. What does Nancy know? Nancy knows a lot about my job because she's worked in this job before. So she knows professionally. She knows professional things. She knows professionally a lot of what I need. She also has a longer relationship with Jesus than I have. And so there is so much for me to learn from Nancy because her relationship with Jesus is longer. Do I know how much longer? No. Because I got saved when I was a kid. And so my relationship with Jesus has a lot of years behind it. But what I know is Nancy has done decades of adulthood that I have not done yet, or at least a decade of adulthood that I haven't done yet. And so her adult relationship with Jesus, I know, is longer than mine. And technically, if you want to know what Nancy knows, she kind of knows everything, right? She's just one of those people who knows where things are in the grocery store that I don't know. She knows about the internet and social justice things that I don't know. I mean, she knows everything. She's Nancy. She's just Nancy. She's a Nancy, you guys. You know how Nancys are. They just know everything. Now, what does Nancy not know? And this is important. She does not know a life of singleness like I know. She does not know what it is like to be 40 and not married yet. Now, does that mean she is not qualified to disciple me? No. See, this is the thing. I think a lot of times we get trapped, particularly when we're thinking about our Beccas, we get trapped in, how can I help her? I don't know that life. But the reality is Nancy can help me with a ton of things, including how to be a person, including understanding what it is like to want something that you don't have. Everybody feels that. And so while Nancy and I aren't in the same place relationally, she still can speak a lot into my life. The same is actually true for Becca. Becca's married, and so I can't be her her mentor as far as how to be a wife, but I can disciple her in the ways of Jesus, of how to serve people, how to love selflessly, how to communicate, that really, really can help in their marriage, even though I'm not married. Let me make some lists about Becca. What does Becca need? This is the question that I think a lot of us are asking about the women that we would even consider discipling. What does Becca need? And particularly, what does Becca need from me? And what does Becca not need? That's a really important question. Sorry, it's taking my arm a long way over there. What does Becca need and what does Becca not need? Well, one thing I know that she does need is she needs a friend, right? She needs a friend because she's new to town. There's a lot she doesn't know about the grocery stores and the restaurants and even how social groups work. So what does Becca need? We know she needs a friend. She doesn't know about the restaurants. She doesn't know about the coffee shops. She doesn't know Nashville. So she didn't have a lot of pals when she moved here. So she needed a friend. But do you know what she doesn't need? She doesn't need me to be her peer, right? She's made other friends that are her peers. And actually, Nancy isn't my peer either. She's a friend, but she's not my peer. These are not people that are in my closest friend groups, right? They have a little bit of distance from that. They have a little better view of my life because of our relationships like this. Now, were we friends before we had DTRs about being in this kind of intentional relationship? Yeah, totally. We were friends before this. But Becca was never looking for a peer from me. She was looking for a friend and someone who was a little bit older that could kind of walk with her in life. And she was looking for a safe place because she doesn't have that yet in Nashville. And also, FYI, I asked both of their permission before I told you any of this. So just so you know, I did say to both of them, can I talk about you? And they both said yes. Becca needed a safe place. She needed somewhere to process some of the things that are going on in her job, some things that are going on in her marriage, some things that are going on in her new friendship. She needed a safe place where she could talk. Now, I'll also tell you, while Nancy is the woman who disciples me, she is not my counselor. I have a counselor, and those relationships are different, right? This is far more spiritually based, a lot more of talking bigger picture, longer things, where my counselor and I kind of hit the thing that's going on today, though Nancy and I can do that too. Becca also has a counselor. What Becca and I are talking about, though, is also the deep things, but in a life place point of view, not from a professional point of view, right? Because your girl ain't a professional counselor. They ain't a bit in the world of me being a professional counselor. But let me tell you the other thing Becca didn't need. She didn't need me to be her mother. Now, there are some of us who, when we look for a discipleship relationship, it is a mothering kind of relationship. Nancy does fill some of that for me. I have a great mom, but Nancy does step in and help me sort some things out from a different point of view that are motherly conversations. That's not what Becca was looking for. I want to tell you, we'll keep describing them, but I want to tell you a little bit about both of our discipleship DTRs. Because it's super important when there are these women in your life, the older and the younger, the ones you're investing in and the ones who are investing in you. There are these moments where you need to actually call it what it is, right? Where you're sharing life with someone, where you're kind of going hey, this isn't just random to me. This has a goal and a purpose. For Nancy and I, it was probably maybe 4 months after we'd been getting lunch every other week or every once a month, maybe. We probably sat together 5 or 6 times. And then I said, hey, Nancy, this really matters to me. Can we make this an actual thing? It was stumbly. It was not easy. It felt vulnerable and weird. And it just was wobbly. It was wobbly. A friend of mine says it's like a giraffe on ice, right? Some of these conversations are like a giraffe on ice. And that's how I felt, very wobbly about it. But I wanted to define it because I wanted to invest in it. There's something that happens. You know that from if you are single and you've been dating, if you're married, you know that in relationships with the opposite sex. But the same is true, really, especially in these two kind of more committed kind of relationships. And with Becca, we were eating lunch. I was having fried chicken. Thank you very much. I remember it very clearly. And we just kind of both paused in the conversation, and I said, hey, I think we should call this a thing. Are you interested in me being in this role in your life? Now, in general, I would say it makes a lot of sense for either party to be the one who kind of starts that conversation around what it looks like to have the discipleship conversation. Do you want to step into this? Unless your church or your if table or your women's Bible study naturally matches people up and everybody understands that's what they're signing up for. If it's not that, then at some point there needs to be this conversation that's hey, I would like for you to be in my life in a mentor discipleship kind of way. And see what happens. Yeah, there's a chance that it doesn't go exactly right and that it feels strange and that it goes a little bit sideways, but you got to be brave in that, right? I mean, that's just part of the deal, is even these relationships require courage from both of us. I want to talk to you a little bit about how these two relationships changed in 2020 because we've all been in our houses pretty constantly. Let's pick a new Sharpie color, shall we? Let's use orange, because I don't really love orange, so let's talk about 2020. For Nancy and I in 2020, obviously we weren't able to get lunches. We weren't able to meet up. And so I got Nancy onto Marco Polo. Well, it was me and I think her kids too. But in 2020, Nancy and I got really good at Marco Polo. If you don't know Marco Polo, it's an app where you kind of send instant message videos back and forth. So you can talk for a minute, you send the video. So it's like instead of voice memoing or instead of Voxer, it's a video version of that. And so we got on Marco Polo. So now, whereas a year ago, Nancy and I were getting lunch or coffee every other week, every once a month, now we are in communication pretty on and off most weeks, because it's just videos we shoot to each other and talk about the real things. But I'll tell you the interesting thing is a couple of weeks ago, I was able to confess sin to Nancy in a really interesting way, because it felt, I wasn't able to watch her face when I was saying like, hey, I need to tell you that I stepped into this. I stepped into a pile of this and I regret it. And I have, here's the boundaries for me moving forward. But because I was talking to my phone, like I was making an Insta story and I knew she was on the other side, there was something about being like, and yes, it lasts forever and yeah, whatever, the internet could find it someday, I don't care, whatever. But I wanted to make sure that the same relationship we had sitting face to face could somehow exist even in quarantine and even in these stay-at-home days. And so I just said it to her through Marco Polo. And then she said right back to me how much she loves me, how she was praying for me. She actually took pictures of this book that had a whole chapter of things I should pray about this particular area of my life. And so through Marco Polo, we're still having our discipleship relationship where she still checks in with me, sees how I'm doing, tells me how much she prays for me. Listen, that is, changing colors again, that is one of the biggest gifts of these relationships, is when we pray for each other. I mean, I know that Nancy prays for me every day, and I hope Becca knows like she knows that I pray for her every day. And I tell her, and Nancy tells me, a couple of weeks ago, I got kind of behind on Marco Polo and work had kicked back up, so it had gotten busy. And I said to Nancy, and Nancy had sent me a couple of things, and I said back, I'm so sorry, and I'm trying to catch up. And she said the most honest thing to me. She said, hey, Annie, I want to be able to text you or Marco Polo you whenever I want to without you feeling guilt. So I need to know that I can do what I want to do and you not feel guilt to respond right away. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's like the kindest, most honest communication of like, hey, I'm not asking you to keep up. I'm asking you to give me permission to love you the way that I love you. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is one of the things I'm learning a lot of things from life with Nancy. But one of the things I'm learning is open communication and just like saying the next thing. It's what made us have such good DTRs, both of these. While they were wobbly moments, a DTR is determine the relationship, by the way, if I didn't say that earlier. A discipleship DTR saying like, what are we doing here? It was real easy because Nancy had opened for me the floodgates of good communication, which helped me in my relationship with Becca too. Let me tell you about 2020 with Becca. So in 2020, we do FaceTime lunches. Ooh, do I know how to spell? We do FaceTime lunches. So every other week during our whole stay-at-home time here in Nashville, and still now, once every other week, we have a FaceTime lunch where we both get our lunches, we open up our computers and get on FaceTime and talk. It's how we've been doing counseling. It's how I've been doing counseling with my counselor. It's how a lot of y'all all zoomed out. I know. You've all been zoomed out of meetings. I know. But this is how we're doing it right now. Now, last week, we went outside and did a social distance hangout in the afternoon one day, but we found ways in the quarantine to still connect. And as we move forward in culture, I think we're going to have to and get to continue to have discipleship change like this. Discipleship alter like this, where social media, not necessarily social media, sorry, technology is going to be the thing that connects us in a lot of ways. So I want to tell you why both these girls were right for me. Women were right for me. Nancy is right for me because she's ahead of me in life. She is a lot of things I want to be. She is a mighty prayer warrior. She is married with kids. She has really healthy relationship with her own body and her own self. She's all these things that I look at and go, okay, could I be that someday? And the best way to figure out how to be someone is to ask that person, right? Or how to be like someone. I just want to be Annie, but I want to be like Nancy in so many ways, and how she studies the Bible and how she like loves people so much. She like is always thinking about other people. All these things that I am not, people. All these things that I am not, Nancy is. And so that's why she was the right person for me. Once we met up and once we were getting along and once I realized I was wanting to ask her deeper questions and tell her deeper things, I realized that this was going to be someone that I'd like to ask to disciple me. I've had a couple of people in my life that have been disciplers of me. When I was in college, there was an older college student. When I was in high school, there was a leader in our youth group. When I first moved to Nashville, there was a young mom. There have been a couple of different women who've stepped into my life like that. And I knew in all those situations, there was something about their life that I was achieving toward, can I say it like that? That I was hoping to be, particularly when it came to their relationship with Jesus. Okay, so why was Becca right for me? When Becca and I started meeting, when she asked me to lunch, when we started spending time, why did I know this was right for me? Well, partly because of what I was experiencing with Nancy, of going like, man, I'm getting, this is very Christian-y, but I'm getting poured into. I should also pour out, right? Like someone is taking time and investing their life into me. How can I do that for someone else? There are a lot of young women in my life here in Nashville, but Becca was different. And the reason this was right for me is we share some history and we have some spiritual similar DNA where we kind of understand where we both have come from growing up. And she was asking me. And so all those put together kind of went like, yeah, we share a lot of life here in town. I understand a lot of the people you're around. I understand where you've come from. And I know where you want to go, right? It just made a lot of sense. And so that's Nancy and Becca. Meet Nancy and Becca. I hope someday you get to really meet Nancy and Becca. They are both such incredible women. I feel so lucky, even though our lives aren't exactly the same. Even though I don't look like them, act like them, I don't have jobs like either of them, they are able to invest in my life and I'm able to invest in theirs. Okay, one more thing I want to tell you about both of them. Let me tell you this permission that Nancy has. Nancy knows she's allowed to ask me anything. She's allowed to ask me absolutely anything. But do you know how she knows that? Because we've talked about it. We've talked about how I've said, Nancy, nothing's off limits. You're allowed to ask. Doesn't mean I'm going to answer, but you're absolutely allowed to ask me anything. Now, with Becca, I'm allowed to ask her anything. But I usually lead with a permission question before a hard question. You know, where I'll say, okay, Becca, she'll be telling me a story and I'll go, can I ask you a hard question about that? And 9 out of 10 times she says, yeah. And 1 out of 10 times she says, hold on, let me finish telling you and then we can decide that, right? But with the person who is investing in me, I have given her full permission to dive into my life because I want to be different after this. Whenever this relationship changes and one of us doesn't have the ability to meet like we do now, I want to be different because of it. And if I don't let her in, if I don't let her ask me if I'm reading my Bible or if I'm praying or the other disciplines of spiritual growth, if I'm not allowing her to ask that, I'm not going to be any different. And actually the same is true about Becca. She's allowed to ask me a lot of things. Because Becca is not my peer and because she's not one of my closest friends, I don't tell her everything, right? Like it's just not appropriate, right? That's not this relationship. This isn't quite 100% mutual either way, right? Nancy doesn't spill all her beans on me, though she does tell me about her life, but there is like this level of withholding from the person doing the discipling, because that's not totally a relationship, is not all the way knowing each other 100% with all the issues and things. That may work for you, but that's not how either of these discipleship relationships or any of mine have ever worked. That there is just this difference. There's a difference. So Becca can ask me questions and we talk about my life for sure. But I'm digging more into helping her grow, and she helps me grow. For sure. I want to pray like this girl prays, you know. I'm learning from her and growing, but Nancy's the one who's really digging in my mess. Does that make sense? Okay, so some Q&A questions. Are you ready? Here we go. This is a breakout group. We're all in the same room. Someone in the back raises their hand, and they ask me this question about discipleship. What if I have messed up in the past? Yeah, what if we've messed up in the past and it feels like I can't disciple anybody. I can't lead anybody. Don't you know that I had an affair? Or don't you know that I went to jail in college? Or that I made a mistake at work and it cost me my job? Or that my husband and I don't always get along? Or that my kids, I don't want this young single woman in my house watching my kids misbehave, because that's going to be embarrassing. Here's the thing. You're very human. I'm very human, and so are Nancy and Becca. Like, we're humans. To pretend like you have not made a mistake, to pretend like your life is not messy is really unfair to the people who you could be investing in. Because what I actually love about Nancy is I know some of her deep losses, and I know some of her pains, and I know some of her struggles, and it makes her easier to relate to. Right? It doesn't make it harder because I'm like, oh no, she's not perfect. Of course. What if I've messed up in the past? You have messed up in the past. So have I. That's part of this gig, y'all, is that we have messed up. And the grace of Jesus is that he still allows us to help other people grow. I'm over here confessing a sin on Marco Polo to Nancy while I'm discipling Becca, right? Like, that's the reality. And so to think that you're disqualified from discipling because of a mistake you've made at some point in your history is really wrong. Now, I will say to you, if you are in a really the middle of a sinful pattern, you should probably work that out. You should probably confess that to someone, your pastor, your discipleship leader, your partner, a friend. Like you shouldn't be like in active sin. None of us should be. That's just like a state we don't want to live in, right? We're all going to mess up constantly, but I'm just meaning, like, if all of our lives are a mess, but if you're like choosing the mess right now, you need to quit choosing the mess and get into discipleship relationships. Because I don't really get to choose the mess anymore like I can on like a habitual level because Nancy's asking me about it. So we're like three of my best friends, but you know how that goes. Okay, question number 2 from the back. What if I ask someone to disciple me and they say no? Right. Or what if you ask someone if they'd like to be discipled by you and they say no? Well, for starters, in both relationships, you're going to get a little red and a little embarrassed. It's going to be embarrassing. Listen, this is a vulnerable relationship. These are vulnerable conversations. And this is a vulnerable moment where you step in with someone, and there is a chance that someone could say no. Hey, listen, I'm 40 and I'm not married yet. I've been dating for about 2 decades, right? A lot of people say no to each other. It's part of the gig. As you get to know someone and then you want to take something to a deeper, more committed level, some people are going to say no. They aren't saying no because they don't like you. They aren't saying no because you're too hard of a project. They're saying no because of their own schedule or because of what else they've got going on or because they're trying to work out their own life, right? So it's very, very rarely personal. As is true with most things that go sideways, it usually has way less to do with you and way more to do with them. But if someone says no to you for that relationship and that's something you're looking for, you can and should feel sad and feel disappointed. You should feel your feelings and then move on. And keep asking God. I was asking God for these relationships. These were part of my prayer life was, God, I want someone who can speak into my life that I can meet with. And I'm not investing in anyone directly. I used to lead a small group here in town of college students. And so when that was going on, there was 11 of them that we met every week. And 11 of them, right? So we were good on the investing in other people category. And then they graduated college and a lot of them moved out of town. And I took probably 2 years before I really started asking God and making space in my life to lead someone again and to disciple someone again. But if someone says no, you'll be all right. You'll be all right. You were brave for asking, and God will bring someone else along. Next question. When should we have a discipleship DTR? Okay, when should you have the conversation, taking this from just friends having coffee or an older woman or a younger woman and you having coffee, getting lunch, into like something intentional? Well, I would say in my life with both these women, it was a couple of months of getting together. I'd say in one hand. Once you've spent a handful, literally, of time eating lunch, getting coffee, going over to their house, hanging out, those kind of things, it's probably worth having a conversation of like, hey, will you actually disciple me for a season or for a while? And the same if you are the older woman or the woman that's having coffee or lunch with the younger woman in your church or in your neighborhood, at your job, where you just go, hey, would we want to study a book of the Bible together? Do you want to do an if study together? Do you want to read the same thing in the mornings? Do you want to do something that looks kind of like discipleship? There's lots of ways your giraffe can skate, right? But I would say a handful of times is a good amount of time to jump into this relationship. Okay, next question. I think I'm too young to disciple someone. Great question. It's not really a question. I wish you to put a question mark, but I think I'm too young to disciple someone. Here's the thing. You aren't. When I was a 19-year-old at the University of Georgia, a 21-year-old was discipling me and really changed my life. If you have been saved 5 days longer than someone else, if you have been studying the Bible 5 days longer than someone else, you have something to invest in them. I think a lot of us think, I'm too young. You think I'm too busy. I made too many mistakes. We can come up with all these reasons that we are not the right woman for Becca. And the truth is, if Becca's walking towards you, you're the right woman. Y'all's lives may not look the same. Becca's younger than me. She's married. She has a different job than me. Our lives don't look the same. She's not looking for a twin. She's looking for someone to walk with her on the path of her life and to talk about spiritual things. Right? So you're not too young to lead somebody. You're not too anything to disciple someone. That's the sentence we hear now. No, you're not any of those things. You're not too old. You're not too young. You're actually not too old to be discipled. It doesn't have to be an age thing. If there is someone whose relationship with God you respect and look up to, whether they are shorter than you or younger than you, you could at least have coffee with them and see, right? Listen, can we just have a timeout? Please, the first time you get coffee with someone is not when you have the DTR. You know this, right? You know this from dating. You know this from friendship. The first time you get coffee with Nancy is not when you're asking her to be your everything. The first time you get lunch with Becca is not when you're inviting yourself into every corner of her life. Be casual, be cool. Don't make big promises on day one. Get to know the women in your village, in your life, in your church, at your job, at your kids' school, in your neighborhood. Get to know the women that are right around you. Who's already going to the Bible study that you've been going to every Tuesday for 8 years? Who's already in that? Who's the new woman who just joined that may need some new friends? Your first thing you're doing here is making friends. Long before you're having a DTR, you're making friends. Next question. Do you like how I'm pretending there's an audience? I know. How do I find someone to disciple? That's a great question. I feel like I kind of just answered that, but I'll go over it again since you asked. It is people that are already in your village. If there's one thing that I'm learning in 2020, between coronavirus, between the lack of travel we're able to do right now, which is why I'm so sad we're not all just in the same place, but we aren't able to travel as easily or as well right now. And with how vicious the internet is getting, I was saying to a friend yesterday on the phone, it feels like maybe God is inviting us to like live where we live and know who we know. Right? Maybe just live where you live and know who you know. And so if you're looking for someone to disciple, if you're like, yes, I want to invest in someone's life, prayer is your first thing. Prayer is your first thing. God, I am asking you to bring somebody into my life that I can invest in, that I can be an older sister to, that I can be a journeyman with, right? Who shares some things in my life with me. And then just start looking around. Just start looking around. Who's already sitting in that Bible study? Who always saddles up next to you at the pool because she's got a 3 and a 4-year-old and you've got a 10 and an 11-year-old. And she starts asking you questions. Who is asking you questions about your life? Because I bet she's a great candidate for y'all to be in this kind of relationship, right? In the same way, if you're looking for someone to disciple you, who are you looking up to? Who do you respect? Who are you wondering what's going on in their lives and how they got there? I want to know how Nancy raised a bunch of really awesome kids. I want to know how she stayed in her marriage for 30, almost 40 years probably. I want to know how she still loves to pray this long into being a human. I want to know how she still likes people this long into being a human, right? And so when she moved to town, I wanted to get coffee with her. And then as we got to know each other, I was like, man, I really want to get to know Nancy. Next question. How long do you meet with the same person? This is a really excellent question. Actually, one of my coworkers and I went over the crowd's questions this morning, and she added this one. She said, just how do you know, and she told me a story of how she was in a mentoring discipleship relationship, and at a point, it just started to feel different. It just started to feel like maybe they weren't able to get up together as much as they were, and their lives were starting to change. And so part of that comes naturally if you move to a different city. Part of that comes naturally if the person discipling you is someone you see every day at work. I used to teach elementary school, and one of my mentors was my co-teacher, who's now a principal. Well, when that's not my job anymore, and when we aren't in the same building and see each other every day, that relationship changes. So some of it is just watching the relationship change. I don't have any idea how long either of these relationships last. As long as they're in Nashville, that's a yes for me. But there may come a time when Nancy's kids need her more than they do this very day. And so she goes, hey, I know we've been able to keep up on Marco Polo really faithfully and see each other about once a month. I'm going to have to back off that a little bit, but I still love you and I'm still praying and reach out, right? Or there may be a time when Becca gets pregnant and has kids and says Annie, I can't get lunch every day, but will you come hold this person and let me take a nap? Yes, that is still part of this relationship, right? So part of it is paying attention to life places. Now, do I stop meeting with Nancy the first time she offends me? No. Do I stop meeting with Becca the first time we have an awkward interaction and oh, that didn't go exactly right, and I feel like maybe I hurt her feelings no. You don't give up. I mean, it's just like every other relationship. You don't give up when you get hurt or tired or bored. That's when we persevere. That's when we go to the other side, right? Romans 5, suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance builds our character, and character gives us hope. When we want to quit, it's not when we quit. That's not when we stop being discipled or discipling, is when we're tired. Give me a break. When we quit is when it's a mutual decision that it's time to move on in other ways. So for now, I'd say you meet with the same person until you're not meeting with that person anymore, right? My hope is that both these women are in my life for a really long time. Next question, can I disciple a man? Now, if you ask that question, you're a woman after my own heart, because I absolutely love dudes. And I love having younger men in my life. I love having older men in my life who are pastors to me and mentors to me. In fact, right now, I just turned 40, and I am every day texting a leader or a pastor and asking them to tell me a book to read for the first 40 days of my 40th year. And a lot of those, half of those at least, are men. There are a lot of really good men who are invested in my life, who care about my life, who pray for me, and who are leaders for me. None of them are discipling me. And the same is actually true with younger men. I don't know if you know this part of my story, but here in Nashville, we have Vanderbilt University that I love, anchor down. And for a while, a lot of their baseball team went to our church. And I became friends with a lot of those players, and really like a big sister to a lot of those players. If they went through a breakup, they would call me. If they needed to know where the detergent was in the grocery store, they'd call me. In fact, 2 nights ago, I went to dinner with 2 of them. They're 30 now. They're not baseball kids anymore. They're not college kids, but they're 30 years old, and we went to dinner to celebrate my birthday. I am absolutely a mentor, pastor, big sister voice in their life. I do not disciple them. Discipling is significantly more intimate. Discipling is asking questions on a vulnerability level that I think is most appropriate between same sex. And so, can I disciple a man? No, I don't think so. I think you can, and I absolutely believe that you can help lead men and help disciple men and help point them toward Christ and point them toward the right male to disciple them. Because what's true about Becca is I'm not the only adult voice in Becca's life. There are a lot of women and men who speak into who Becca is becoming. I'm just one of them. And Nancy is one of the voices. Now, one of the loudest voices for sure, one of the most impactful voices, but she is thankfully in a symphony of pastors and leaders and my parents and my counselor, people who speak into my life. And it is super appropriate for men and women to speak into my life. When it comes to discipleship, it's a woman. Same is true when I'm looking downward, not looking down, you know what I mean? But when I'm looking downward in the discipleship model, it is absolutely good and appropriate for me to invest in the lives of young men. It is absolutely right that I am one of the voices investing in the growth of young men I care about, whether it's my friends' kids who are 9 or whether it's my Vandy guys who are now 30. It is absolutely appropriate that I am one of the voices they turn to. Do not need to be their only voice or their primary voice, because I can help Becca figure out a lot about how to be a good wife and mom and woman of God, because we share a lot of things. To become a good husband, father, man of God, I can sure help, but a man is going to help my buddies get there a lot faster than I am. So there's that. Okay, wait, Craig, our video guy just said, what about my question? Can you be discipling someone while you're waiting to be discipled? Yes. Can you start? Yes, that's a great question from the actual audience. My gosh, Craig. Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think one of the things that is true is that your spiritual growth is already happening. So you already have something to offer someone else. So that's a great point. You should not wait for Nancy to start living in a life with Becca. So yes, if the first person you see, if the first relationship that comes easily to you is one where you get to disciple someone else, go for it. But just keep asking God for someone to invest in you too. So that's a great question, Craig. Okay, last question, then we have to go. Hands down. Sorry, everyone put your hand down. I'm so sorry. You'll have to get those to me a different way. How do I make time to be discipled or to disciple someone else? Excellent question, and exactly where I want to end. Here is the biggest hindrance in many of our lives. If you can get over the hurdle that you're not worthy enough to disciple someone, the next hurdle is, I don't have the time. When I was in my 20s and I lived in Atlanta, there was a woman and married 2 kids, and they would just have me over for dinner. I would come over and eat dinner, and I would watch the whole thing after school. I mean, the whole thing. Middle schoolers, they were wild, homework, getting dinner done. I would help a little bit with dinner. We would sit and eat, and then the husband and the kids would go do whatever, and we would sit and talk for 40 minutes or an hour. Again, we haven't even talked about this. It doesn't have to be 9 hours every time you meet, you guys. It can be 30 minutes. It can be Marco Polos for 5 minutes. It can be an hour slot like Becca and I have every other week. Every conversation doesn't have to last for 5 hours, okay? Okay. So we would talk for a couple of minutes after dinner. She did not change her life. She invited me in. She didn't have extra time to give me her whole evening once a month, but she sure had enough extra time to give me 30 minutes after I helped her do dishes when we had eaten dinner with the family. Right? So you've got the time. One of the girls here that I used to disciple that was in my small group, very often I would pick them up. I remember doing this really clearly with one girl named Anna. I would pick them up while I was running errands, and they would go with me. They were college students, so they were free from noon to always. And so I would pick them up, and they would just run errands with me, and then we'd go get a Coke Icy from Burger King and go sit at a park and talk. I mean, I am busy. Y'all are busy. There is a lot going on in our lives. But what we know is that we have this invitation from God to invest in the women that are coming up behind us, either spiritually, physically, emotionally, relationally, whatever. And we can fit them into our lives. So how do you make time for discipleship? Is you just make time for discipleship. How do you make time to sleep? Well, you can't live without it. How do you make time to eat? I know we're eating, right? How do you make time to see your friends? How do you make time to watch your shows? How do you make time to get on your Peloton? How do you make time to go on a jog? You just make time. For the things that matter most to you, that you think are going to give you the exact life you want, you make time for it. And that is absolutely true about discipleship. If you want to become the woman you want to become, you need a Nancy. And so you need to start asking God for Nancy. And actually, for you to be the woman of God that you want to become, you need a Becca, because it is refining and it is important. And so you need to ask God and start looking around, right? Do you know that thing of when you buy a blue car, you suddenly notice that everybody has blue cars? When you buy a certain kimono, you notice that like 4 other people that day wore that kimono. The same is true. When you start praying and looking for the answers, they're kind of everywhere. And so that's my prayer for you, and I am going to pray for us as we go that a Nancy would come along for you if you don't have one. If you've been hurt, I know, I thought there was a question about that in here. I guess not. I know there are people who have been hurt in discipleship relationships, and you think, I can't do this again. Well, I hear you, and I believe you, and I believe that relationships, there are probably people who would say to you that they have been hurt in a discipleship relationship by Annie F. Downs, right? I'm very human, but we don't quit when we get hurt. We don't quit when we get hurt. That's not when we walk away. So we ask God for healing. We forgive because forgiveness only shackles you. Unforgiveness only shackles you, right? So we forgive and we move on and look for healthier relationships. The healthier you get, the healthier the relationships are that come along for you. And when you get hurt in them, the healthier the recovery is. And so we keep trying. We keep trying. I've been hurt in both these types of relationships, but we just can't quit. And so my prayer for you is that you won't quit, that you'll keep looking, that you'll keep investing, that you will find a Nancy, find a Becca, and that you will give your life to them in 2 very different ways, but give your life to them. So let me pray for us. Lord, I just thank you. I thank you for Nancy, and I thank you for Becca. I thank you that these women have so impacted my life in the last couple of years. I'm just really thankful for all of our friends that are watching. God, I ask that you would give them right eyes about this, that they would see what you've called them to, that they would see the invitation from you, that they would actually just look around their village, look around their life, and they would see these women who have always been there. And they would see that they have something to offer. God, I just ask that you would align our schedules, align our hearts, and let us be a generation who not only invests well, but learns well from the women above us. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, friends. Love you, mean it. If you need anything, I'm embarrassingly easy to find. Annie F. Downs all over the place. I think the world of you, and I wish you well as you go on your discipleship journey. Mwah. Love you, If Lead.